Alright, today we're going to take a look at the basics of using the brush tool in Adobe Photoshop CS4. The first thing we need to do is open up a new file. So I'll go to File, New. This new box opens up that gives us information about the new file that we're going to create. We can change the name of it. I'm going to change this to Brush Demo. We can also change the width and height, resolution, color mode, and background contents of the file. You might notice that mine is set on pixels right now, but we can change that to inches, centimeters, millimeters, points, pockets, or columns. For right now, I'm going to change it to inches, and I'm going to make the width 10 inches, and I'm going to make the height 8 inches. I'm also going to change the resolution. This is how many pixels there are per inch. Since Photoshop is a raster-based program instead of a vector-based program, it does operate with little small squares. These are called pixels. Right now my resolution is at 72 pixels per inch. That's a pretty good size for a web image, but since this image might be printed, I'm going to change it to 300 pixels per inch. Anything more than that is really overkill, and anything less than that, well, depending on what the application may be appropriate. 300 is a good standard place to start. Also, I'm going to make sure that my color mode for right now is on RGB, but you could also change it to bitmap, grayscale, CMYK, or lab color. My background contents right now are set on white. That means I'm going to have a white sheet of paper if I create this file. Basically a white sheet of paper. I could change it to transparent. Let me show you what that will look like. Instead of a white background, you have this checkerboard background. This basically just indicates that this is a transparent background. Any marks that I make on here will rest on a transparent background. This is good for some web applications and for other applications, but for right now, I want a white background. So let me X out of this and create a new file. Again, changing pixels to inches and making sure that the sizes and choices that I want are made. Change the resolution back to 300. This time we'll change the background contents to white. I'll click OK. Now basically what I have is a large white canvas. My background right now is gray. We can change that if we want by right clicking in the gray space, and we can change the color. But gray's what I like, so we'll leave it at gray. I'm also going to hit Control minus and zoom out so that you can see the entire canvas plane that I've made. Now over here in our toolbar, let's slide this a little bit closer, we can select the brushes. Okay, now if we go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from the top is our brush. Okay, if we hold it down, the pencil tool is also hiding underneath there, and the color replacement tool as well. But right now we want the brush tool. Now the color that we will be making a mark with is indicated at the bottom of our toolbar. It's the color that's on top. This is considered our foreground color, and this is considered our background color. Another way to think about this is if we make a mark, it'll be black, but if we chose to erase, it would be white. We can switch these colors if we want, by clicking on this button. Now the white color is the foreground color, and the black color is the eraser color or the background color. We want to see our mark, so we'll leave it on black. Now, right now you might see that I have a big circle on my screen. This is the mark that my brush will make if I put pressure. That's a really large mark. So I can hit Control Z and get rid of what I've already done. So I want the mark to be a little bit smaller. You can do this a couple of ways. First of all, you might have noticed that when you chose your brush tool, some of your options at the top of the screen changed. When you chose your brush tool, it might tell you that, hey, you've got the brush tool selected, but it also might tell you over here the type of mark that you'll make with the brush. You can change this by clicking on the arrow. Then you can see all the different brushes that you have selected right now, or that you have at your disposal. You can have more brushes at your disposal by clicking on this arrow, and you have several different brush sets to choose from. If you ever want to go back to the original set, you can just click on Reset Brushes, and it'll bring this original set of brushes back. There are some other things we can change about the brushes as well. First of all, we can change the master diameter. Right now it's set on 911 pixels. If we move this down, then go back and make a mark, we can see the mark that we make is a lot smaller. You can also change the hardness of the mark that you're making. For example, if my hardness is turned up to 100% and my master diameter is turned up to 83%, this is the type of mark that it would make. If I go back up here and I bring my hardness down to 0 using the same size brush, this is what type of mark it will make. You might notice that the second mark that we made is a little bit blurrier on the edges, and this is what hardness refers to. There's some more information up here about the brush that we can adjust. For example, we can change the mode of the mark that we're making, from normal to dissolve, darken, and so on. You can experiment with these to see what will happen to your mark with a different mode. You can also change the opacity of the mark that you make, or the flow. Opacity is how much you can see through it, or the transparency of the mark. For example, with your opacity set on 100%, this is the mark you can expect. If, however, I turn the opacity down to 40%, this is the mark you can expect. If I make another mark on top of the mark that I've already made, you might notice that it gets darker over the areas that I overlap, just like a watercolor brush or an airbrush would make. You can also change the flow, or how quickly the ink or color that you're using comes out of the brush. For example, if I turn the flow down to 41%, it might not look like there's much of a difference. If I bring it all the way down to 8%, there's a noticeable difference. To help you understand the difference between flow and opacity, let me make my mark a little bit larger and bring the flow all the way up to 100% and make a mark, and then bring it down to about 48% or 50% and make a mark. It still might be hard to see a difference, but there is a slight difference. You can experiment around with the flow and opacity to create a variety of different marks. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up a new file again, and I'm going to go through the same steps as before. Instead of backing up and erasing everything, I think that this will be easier. Again, the resolution needs to be on 300. And I'll zoom back out so you can see what I'm doing clearly. Alright, now you may have noticed that when I make a mark with a brush, let me change my diameter, make it a little bit smaller, and bring my hardness up on it to 100%. You may have noticed that when I make a mark, that it may start skinny and slowly get fatter, and I can make it skinny again if I want. This is accomplished by using a tablet. Now the tablet driver allows me to adjust the pressure that I put on the pen, and when I put a little bit of pressure, it makes a small mark. When I put a lot of pressure, it makes a thicker mark. Again, this can only be accomplished by using a tablet. Let me show you where the settings are for the brush to do that. Once you have the brush selected, if you go up here to the top to the little folder right here, looks like a folder with a list of things, and you click on that, your brush options come up. In order to have this effect happen, you have to make sure that you click on Shape Dynamics. And then under Shape Dynamics, you need to make sure that under Control, Pen Pressure is selected. If it's set on the off position, even if you have a tablet, it will not work. So you'll have to make sure Pen Pressure is selected. It'll give you an idea of what type of mark you're going to make before you make it. There are a lot of other options underneath these brush presets that you can play around with. For example, if I clicked on Scattering, you can see what kind of mark it would make. Let's see what happens here. It's hard to see maybe, but there is a change in the mark. You can play around with the different types of effects that you can create on your brush to see what will happen. So the brush has a variety of different options that makes it very versatile. You can create all kinds of artwork with this brush. Now let's say you've made a mistake and you want to change it. Well, if you're using a tablet, like I said before, you may have an eraser end, and that's the opposite end of the pen or the stylus that you're using. So if I just use mine, I can just turn my pen upside down, and then I can actually erase. Very simple. Now, just like the options on the brush tool, if I want to make a thick mark, I can do the same thing with the eraser. If I want to make a thin mark or a thick mark, it's all dependent on how much pressure I put on the eraser. Now let's say I wanted to erase all of this at one time, and I didn't want to waste my time really doing a lot of erasing. It's very easy to change that. Your eraser tool is just a couple more down from the brush tool. It's this one right here. And we want to make sure that the eraser tool is selected and not the background eraser tool or the magic eraser tool. You can double click on the eraser, and up here at the top you'll notice that your options are very similar to your brush options. You can change the diameter, you can change the hardness, you can change even the type of brush that your eraser is going to be using. You can also change it from a brush to a pencil or a block. Let's say I wanted to erase a lot of things at one time and make the diameter very large, make sure that my opacity is 100% and my flow is 100%, and then I can erase things quickly and easily. Just like that. So these are the basics of using the brush tool and the eraser. I hope it helps you out. One more thing before I go. It's really easy to change the color. Right down here in the toolbar, just double click on the color, the foreground color, and pick a different color. And there you have it. I hope this helps you out.